My earliest memories, tinged with a melancholic blue, are like faded snapshots in a dusty album. A ghost in these images had vanished before my 5th birthday, leaving a void that Mom, whom I knew as Anna, filled with a storm cloud of unpredictable emotions. One moment she'd be a whirlwind of frantic energy scrubbing the tiny apartment floor while muttering about a fresh start. The next she'd engulf me in a crushing hug, her grip so tight it stole my breath. These suffocating embraces, though infrequent, were the only crumbs of affection I desperately craved. Mostly I existed as a small shadow trailing behind her as she flitted through the apartment, her face, touched with a worry that seemed to possess a life of its own, haunted me. Sometimes when the worry lines deepened into furrows across her brow, she'd leave me with Mrs. Rodriguez downstairs, a kind, plump woman who always smelled faintly of cinnamon. When Mom finally returned, the air in our cramped apartment would crackle with tension like static electricity before a storm. She'd ruffle my hair with a distracted sigh, a gesture that felt more like an obligation than a loving caress. Then a fleeting smile, a mere glimpse of the warmth I yearned for, would flicker across her face before vanishing again. As time crawled by, Mom started dating again. Then came Mark, a man with eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed, a sound that was rare in our tense lives. Unlike the whirlwind that was Mom, Mark moved with a gentle calm. He treated me with a kindness that felt utterly foreign in our household, a soothing balm on my perpetually anxious soul. I remember one particularly humiliating incident at school with Jessica Miller and her clique. Their cruel words, like tiny poisoned darts, left me wounded and raw. I found myself clinging to Mark on the worn-out couch, tears blurring my vision. "Why do they always pick on me?" I mumbled into his soft shirt, the familiar ache of loneliness constricting my chest. He knelt before me, his eyes reflecting a concern I wasn't used to seeing from adults. "They pick on you because they're insecure," he said softly, gently wiping away a stray tear. "They want to feel powerful by making others feel small." His words, simple yet profound, were a soothing balm to my wounded spirit. In that moment, a fragile flicker of hope ignited within me. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to look up. But hope in my world was a fragile butterfly easily crushed. Then came Lily, a tiny bundle of joy, with eyes that mirrored Mom's. She arrived a year later suddenly, shifting the entire axis of our small world. I wasn't the center of attention anymore. All the warmth, all the affection I had so desperately craved seemed to evaporate, replaced by a cold indifference that chilled me to the bone. Mom's focus narrowed entirely to Lily, leaving me adrift in the confusing ocean of childhood, utterly alone. By the time I turned 14, awkward braces framed a permanent frizz halo around my head, a physical manifestation of the knot of insecurity. The size of Texas, tightening in my gut. It was also the age when Mom's subtle negativity towards me bloomed into a full-blown weed garden of criticism and disdain. Take picture day at school, for instance. Mom took the day off work, not for me, but to fuss over Lily's pigtails and meticulously pick out the perfect sparkly dress. When it came to my turn, a sigh heavy with exasperation escaped her lips as she rummaged through my closet. "Ugh, nothing decent in here," she muttered, her words like a physical blow. Of course, when picture day arrived, Lily looked like a little princess radiating sunshine, while I resembled a rumpled dandelion lost in her shadow. Mom cooed over Lily's photo, her eyes shining with pride, while mine received a cursory glance and a dismissive grunt. Mark, bless his kind heart, tried to be the positive voice in my life. He'd take me shopping sometimes, patiently helping me pick out clothes that actually fit and flattered my burgeoning teenage figure. One day, after a particularly frustrating day, filled with Mom's cutting remarks, I found myself clinging to him, the overwhelming need for comfort washing over me. "Dad," the word slipped out before I could stop it, a yearning I hadn't realized I still harbored. He froze, a pained expression crossing his gentle face. Mom appeared in the doorway, her eyes blazing with icy fury. "You have one father, Elena?" she hissed, her voice laced with venom. "And trust me, he doesn't deserve you." Her words stung like a slap across the face. Mark, sensing the palpable tension, awkwardly ruffled my hair. "Look, it's okay." He mumbled, his own discomfort evident. "It's not okay." I choked out tears welling up in my eyes. Lily, who had been watching the whole scene unfold with a smug expression, suddenly piped up her voice, dripping with false innocence. "Elena's been bad again, Daddy. She took my candy without asking." 16. The treacherous land of first crushes. Awkward dances under the gymnasium lights and a constant knot of nerves churning in my stomach. Dating, however, was a minefield in my house. Mom possessed a unique and devastating knack for sabotaging any potential romance before it even had a chance to sprout legs. Take Jake, for example, tall, funny, and blessed with a smile that could melt glaciers. He was everything a teenage girl could dream of. After weeks of nervous texts and stolen glances in the hallways, I finally gathered the courage to ask him out. He said yes. Excitement bubbled in my chest, a feeling quickly replaced with a gnawing dread at the thought of him meeting Mom. The night of our date, Mom went into overdrive, transforming into a caricature of a doting mother, but only for Lily. She fussed over Lily's bedtime story, making sure it stretched on for an eternity. A deliberate delay tactic. When Jake finally arrived, looking endearingly nervous but sweet in his slightly too big button-down shirt, Mom greeted him with a smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. "Elena never cleans her room," she announced casually, as if discussing the weather. "You might find socks and pizza boxes under that mountain of clothes." My cheeks burned like they were on fire. Jake gave a nervous chuckle, but the awkward silence that followed stretched like a bad joke. The rest of the evening was a disaster. Mom kept making snide remarks about my weight, my questionable taste in music, even my aspirations for college. By the end of the night, Jake practically ran out the door, leaving me feeling like a deflated balloon, my fragile teenage heart bruised and aching. The story repeated itself with a few other unfortunate guys. After that, each time I dared to bring someone home, Mom would transform into a master of backhanded compliments and subtle digs, each carefully chosen word chipping away at my already fragile self-confidence. Any potential relationship fizzled out faster than a wet firecracker. 18, the age of college applications, tearful but determined, goodbyes and a fierce burning determination to break free from the suffocating grip of my childhood senior year became my mission control. A strategic plan meticulously crafted to launch myself into a world where Mom's negativity couldn't reach me. College applications became my weapon of choice. I spent countless hours hunched over the kitchen table, pouring my heart and dreams onto those pristine white pages. Each word a testament to my yearning for something more. Every acceptance letter that arrived in the mail was a small victory, a tiny shard of hope chipping away at the towering wall Mom had built around me. Of course, she didn't make it easy. When I announced my acceptance to a university across the state, her reaction was a masterpiece of passive aggression. "Oh, Elena," she sighed, shaking her head with theatrical sorrow. "So far away. How will we ever see each other?" It was a question loaded with guilt, a carefully aimed emotional arrow. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. "We can video chat." "Mom," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Besides, there are these things called airplanes." Mark, my ever-supportive anchor, was thrilled for me. "This is amazing, Elena," he beamed, pulling me into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you." His words were a warm hug on a cold day. He may not have been my dad by blood, but he felt more like one than the man who had walked out on us all those years ago. College was a revelation, surrounded by people who didn't know my family history. I finally felt like I could breathe. I blossomed in a sea of new experiences, challenging myself academically and forging friendships that felt genuine and supportive. A stark contrast to the isolation I had always known. 27, the land of adulting, endless spreadsheets that never seemed to balance, and a tiny apartment in the city that felt like a palace compared to my cramped childhood bedroom. Life, for the most part, was good. My job as an economist kept my brain buzzing, and David, my amazing boyfriend of the past few years, brought a warmth and laughter into my life I hadn't known existed before. One evening over takeout, Thai food and a bottle of cheap wine, David dropped a bombshell. "So," he said, looking at me with that goofy grin I adored, "I think it's time we met each other's parents." My stomach lurched. Meeting David's folks had been easy, a complete breeze. They lived in a cozy house with a sprawling backyard that smelled like freshly cut grass, and they had welcomed me with open arms. His mom, Sarah, practically smothered me in hugs, and his dad, Michael, spent the entire evening cracking jokes that had me snorting into my napkin. They were warm, funny, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. It felt normal, a word I never dared to associate with family dinners in my past life. But the thought of David meeting my, interesting family filled me with a profound dread. How could I possibly explain the years of emotional neglect, the constant jabs, the suffocating negativity that had chipped away at my self-esteem for years? Lily, unsurprisingly, hadn't gotten any better. How? A master manipulator who knew exactly how to push my buttons. I told him everything. The fights, the tears, the way Mom had systematically undermined me for years. David listened patiently, his hand resting gently on mine. "Elena," he said firmly, his gaze unwavering, "I'm marrying you, not your family. They may be baggage, but you're the prize." His words were a balm to my soul, a declaration of love that washed away years of doubt. Maybe, just maybe, I could finally build a happy family of my own. One filled with love, acceptance, and laughter. The kind of family I never had, but the kind I always deserved. My stomach twisted tighter than a pretzel as I dialed Mark's number. This was it. D-Day for breaking the news about David and the engagement. "Hey, Elena, what's up?" Mark's familiar voice boomed through the phone. "Hey, Mark," I said, taking a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you." I launched into the story, spilling the beans about David, the proposal, and the upcoming wedding. There was a comfortable silence on the other end of the line. Then a genuine laugh erupted. "Elena, that's fantastic. I'm so happy for you both." His words washed over me like a warm wave, easing some of the anxiety that had been gnawing at me. "Listen," he continued. "You gotta bring him over for dinner. Let me meet the guy who finally snagged you. David, bless." His supportive heart was all for it. So a few weeks later, we found ourselves pulling up to my childhood home, a place that still held a strange mix of nostalgia and dread. Mom answered the door, her face breaking into a surprised smile. "Elena, you came to visit? And who is this handsome fella?" "Mom, this is David, my fiancé," I said, offering a tight smile. David stepped forward, extending a hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Turner." Mom beamed, shaking his hand a little too enthusiastically. "The pleasure's all mine, dear. So, David, what do you do for a living?" David, oblivious to the subtle undercurrent of Mom's question, launched into a detailed explanation of his work as a director at a large company. Mark, ever the smooth operator, chimed in with jokes and stories, keeping the conversation flowing. Lily, of course, wasn't about to be outdone. She spent the entire meal batting her eyelashes at David, interrupting our conversations to pepper him with inane questions about his job and hobbies. Mom, ever the doting mother to Lily, fawned over her every word, a stark contrast to the thinly veiled barbs she kept throwing my way. "Elena, honey," she'd say, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "you really should take some fashion tips from Lily. That dress you're wearing, well, it's not exactly flattering." David thankfully seemed oblivious to the subtle digs, but I knew exactly what Mom was doing. She was systematically putting me down, making me feel insecure right in front of my fiancé. The entire dinner felt like a twisted performance, a play where I was constantly reminded of how I wasn't good enough, not pretty enough, not successful enough. By the time dessert rolled around, I was ready to run screaming. As soon as it was polite, we made our excuses and left. The moment we were safely buckled into the car, David let out a long sigh. "Your mom, she's a character, isn't she?" he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Yeah," I muttered, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. "She can be." He squeezed my hand gently. "But hey, we made it through dinner, right?" He was right. We had. And even with Mom's negativity hanging in the air like a bad smell, the simple act of holding David's hand filled me with a sense of strength and purpose. This was my future. A future I was building with him, not with my dysfunctional family. The warm glow of post-dinner satisfaction lingered in the air as David and I curled up on the couch, poring over wedding magazines. We envisioned a small, intimate ceremony in a charming vineyard, surrounded by the people who loved and supported us. It was perfect. Then the next morning, the dream shattered into a million pieces. My phone buzzed with David's name, his usual cheerful ringtone replaced by a jarring, insistent ringing that sent a shiver down my spine. "Elena," he said, his voice tight with a mix of anger and disbelief. "We have a problem." My stomach lurched. "What's wrong?" He took a deep breath. "Your mom." The blood drained from my face. What had she done this time? David explained, his words hitting me like punches. Mom, the ever-reliable manipulator, had somehow unearthed his work phone number. And instead of a congratulatory call, she'd unleashed a verbal tirade that would make a sailor blush. Apparently, in her twisted world, I was the epitome of inadequacy, ugly, dull, and lacking any social graces. But it didn't stop there. She'd even dragged Dad into it, dredging up his abandonment years ago like a weapon. But the pièce de résistance, she'd suggested David ditch me and turn his sights on Lily, claiming my younger sister was the epitome of beauty and brains. Fury boiled up inside me, a hot, venomous rage. How dare she? How dare she try to sabotage my happiness yet again? David, bless his heart, was furious, too. But he channeled his anger into something unexpected. A plan. A crazy, audacious plan that was equal parts risky and thrilling. "We expose her," he said, his jaw clenched. "We set a trap." The plan was audacious in its simplicity. David would call Mom back, pretend to be swayed by her words, and arrange a meeting to discuss this ludicrous proposal. His goal, to record the entire conversation on his phone. David made the call, his voice smooth and convincing. Mom, completely oblivious to the web she was about to walk into, readily agreed to meet him for coffee. A nervous laugh bubbled up from my chest. This was it. Operation Momzilla Takedown was a go. The outcome was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let my mother dictate my future any longer. This time, the tables were turning, and I was ready to play for keeps. I decided to attend their meeting disguised as a stranger. The thought of confronting Mom, especially in this clandestine way, sent shivers down my spine. But the anger simmering inside me, the righteous anger at her constant negativity and at her relentless attempts to sabotage my happiness, was a powerful motivator. Back in my comfy jeans and a worn-out t-shirt, I slipped into a corner booth at a bustling cafe across the street from our designated meeting spot. Thick black glasses perched on my nose completed the disguise, transforming me into a nondescript observer. Butterflies danced a frenetic jig in my stomach as I watched Mom saunter into the cafe, a triumphant smile plastered on her face. She spotted David at the prearranged table in a private room, her smile widening further. This was it, Operation Momzilla. Takedown was officially underway. David, bless his tech-savvy heart, had discreetly turned on the voice recorder on his phone. Me, well, I could hear their entire conversation in the immediate vicinity. Their conversation started, innocently enough, David playing the part of the interested suitor. Then Mom, completely oblivious to his recording device, launched into her diatribe. "You know David," she began, leaning in conspiratorially. "Between you and me, Elena just isn't wife material." My blood ran cold. The woman who was supposed to be my mother, the woman who was supposed to love and support me, was bad-mouthing me to a complete stranger. "She's, well, a bit simple," Mom continued, her voice laced with fake sympathy. "Not very pretty either, if you know what I mean." David, to his credit, kept his face impassive, simply nodding along and murmuring non-committal phrases. Inside, I knew he must be fuming. "But Lily," Mom's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, "now that's a girl with potential, smart, beautiful, knows how to handle herself in society." The audacity of it all, Lily, with her airheaded personality and complete lack of work ethic, was apparently the epitome of elegance and intelligence, according to Mom. The conversation continued, a masterclass in manipulation and deceit. Mom, blinded by her own delusions, even confessed to never loving my stepfather, claiming she'd only married him for his money. The woman had no shame. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mom stood up, her face radiating self-satisfaction. "Well, David, it was lovely meeting you. Think about what I said," she purred, patting his hand with a perfectly manicured nail. As she walked out of the cafe, I could only shake my head in disbelief. So what now? I asked, my voice tight with a mixture of disbelief and a strange sense of vindication. David pulled me into a hug, his touch a solid source of comfort amidst the swirling storm of emotions. Now, he said, his voice firm with determination, we expose her. The air crackled with tension that weekend as I walked into my childhood home. Mom's smile was a mile wide, radiating a smugness that set my teeth on edge. Elena, honey, you won't believe it. She gushed, the words tumbling out before I even had a chance to say hello. What's that, Mom? I asked, already bracing myself for another emotional bombshell. David, she declared, her voice dripping with a sickeningly sweet satisfaction, decided to see reason. He's leaving you and marrying Lily. My heart did a little stutter, but I forced a smile. That's great, Mom. Really happy for them? My stepfather, bless his perpetually confused soul, cleared his throat. Leaving her. But I thought they were getting married, Lily. Lily, who had been lounging on the couch like a pampered cat, snorted a laugh. Apparently not, Dad. Elena just wasn't good enough for him. Shocker. I ignored her snide remark. My eyes locked on Mom's triumphant face. It's showtime. Actually, Mom, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. David's right here. Just then, David walked in, a sly grin plastered on his face. His unexpected presence sent a collective gasp echoing through the room. Hi, everyone, he said, his voice laced with amusement. Just in time for a little family fun. He pulled out his phone and pressed play. The room fell silent as Mom's voice, dripping with malice, filled the air. The entire conversation from the cafe played out her vicious diatribe about me, her glowing praise for Lily, the shocking confession about my stepfather. The color drained from Mom's face with each passing sentence. My stepfather turned a shade of purple, his jaw slack with disbelief. As for Lily, her bravado crumbled, replaced by a terrified whimper. When the recording ended, a deathly silence descended upon the room. Then my stepfather exploded. You lying snake! He roared, his voice shaking with fury. You married me for money all these years. Mom, for the first time in my life, looked genuinely lost. Tears welling up in her eyes, but they were overshadowed by the storm brewing in my stepfather's face. I want a divorce, he declared, his voice thick with anger. Get a lawyer. The room imploded. Mom and Lily burst into tears. A cacophony of misery and self-pity filled the air. David, bless his heart, looked as comfortable as a fish out of water caught in a hurricane. Amidst the chaos, I felt a strange sense of calm. The truth, ugly and raw, was finally out in the open. The years of unspoken hurt, the manipulation, the lies. It all spilled out, shattering the fragile facade of our dysfunctional family. The following weeks were a blur of legal jargon, choked sobs from my stepfather, and icy stares from Lily. Whenever our paths crossed at the grocery store, Mom, the architect of this whole mess, retreated into a self-imposed social media blackout. As for me, I felt strangely hollow. The anger that had fueled me for so long was gone, leaving a gaping hole that needed filling. One sunny afternoon, David found me curled up on the couch, mindlessly flipping through wedding magazines that now seemed like dusty relics from a bygone era. Hey, he said, his voice laced with concern. You all right? I managed a weak smile. Yeah, just thinking. Everything just feels so different. He squeezed onto the couch beside me, pulling me into a comforting hug. It is, he admitted. But hey, different can be good. A chance to start fresh, you know. His words were a gentle nudge in the right direction. Maybe he was right. Maybe the mom-shaped void in my life could be filled with something new, something exciting. A spark ignited in my chest. So, I said, a mischievous glint in my eyes. What do you say we do something crazy? David's eyebrows shot up. Crazy like what? How about a road trip? I suggested, a grin spreading across my face. Just us, a map, and the open road. No expectations, no timelines, just pure adventure. You had me at road trip, he declared. And so our plans took a sharp turn. The meticulously planned vineyard ceremony morphed into a spontaneous cross-country adventure. We packed a beat-up camper van with essentials, copious snacks, a killer playlist, and a well-worn copy of On the Road, and hit the road with no destination in mind. Only the promise of new experiences and shared memories. Fast forward a year, and David and I were standing at the altar exchanging vows under a canopy of fragrant flowers. It wasn't the elaborate ceremony I'd once envisioned, but it was perfect. Instead of a disapproving mother, my stepfather, recently divorced and estranged from, Lily, walked me down the aisle. The tears in his eyes were a mixture of pride and regret, and as he squeezed my hand, he muttered, "You know, kiddo, I always knew you'd find your happily ever after." Life after the wedding settled into a comfortable rhythm. David and I built a life together filled with laughter, love, and the occasional road trip adventure. My stepfather became a regular visitor, regaling us with stories from his travels and dropping not-so-subtle hints about wanting to be a grandpa. With a laugh, I'd reply, "Don't worry, you'll be the best grandpa ever." Valuable lesson: sometimes the toxic relationships we are born into need to be confronted, even if it's painful. Creating healthy boundaries and choosing your own family, the people who genuinely love and support you, is essential for building a happy and fulfilling life. Don't be afraid to step away from negativity and embrace the possibility of a brighter future. What are your thoughts on this story? Share your comments below, and if you enjoyed this narrative, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories.